Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now, we introduce our guest and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Lawline. Getting the appropriate amount of insurance for your business or home could be one of the most important decisions you make. Today we'll look at the factors you consider in taking out a policy, the importance of choosing the right broker, and what to do if you're involved in a loss. Our guests are Ben Zalman, my partner at Zalman & Schnorman, who represents claimants who have suffered major insurance losses, and David Kane. David's one of the leading brokers in New York City. Hello, Ben. Hello, David.
Hello, Alan.
David, tell me, what should a business owner know about? He knows he has to get insurance. He's got a business, but of course he wants to get as much insurance at the least amount of cost that he possible. What does he need?
Well, basically we have policies today that are nicely packaged for the small business owner, where he buys one policy which covers his property and his liability. And there are enhancements to that, of course, if he wishes to enlarge his coverage. He can get fine arts coverage if he has paintings in his office. He can buy accounts receivable coverage. He can
What's that? What's accounts receivable coverage?
All right, everybody has receivables that
People owe me money.
Right, okay, so you can insure that if your records are lost and you have to reproduce them. There's a lot of money involved and time involved in doing something like that.
Now, you mentioned liability, right? Now, I assume that's if somebody falls on my property.
Generally, trip and fall is the most common form of loss.
What about if one of my employees is using his car, but on my business? Does it cover him for that if I get sued?
He's covered if he's added hired car.
Oh, you got to add something.
He has to add hired car. So if there are employees in the business and they do use their car, it's a question we generally ask. You have to add this coverage. It is not in the basic liability clause.
Now, when you said property, I'm assuming that's if I have a fire, right?
Well, fire, water damage, explosion, smoke damage, there are a great many.
Are all water damage coverage is covered in this?
In some forms. There are two forms of policies. One is called basic and the other is called special. The special is what we call all risk form. It does pick up water damage.
You know, at the risk of interrupting, I
Yes.
think what David is saying is that whereas traditionally insurance companies would offer one type of policy, today it's a much broader field out there, and you can add things on and essentially get a custom-made policy for the smaller businessman. Isn't that right,
Well,
David?
that's correct.
Yeah.
You have to
But they
add
have
these
to know
in.
what to ask, though. That's the problem.
It's up to the broker to ask the proper questions. You can't expect the client to know what he should have.
Right.
So you have to, it's your responsibility to understand his type of operation and decide what questions you should ask him and decide what coverages are best for him.
Now, when we talk about, like you gave an example, water damage.
Right.
And water damage can be many things. The pipe could break upstairs
Right.
in the office above me and flood my premises, and I'd be covered for that.
Yes, you
But
would.
what happens if I'm on the first floor and there's a tremendous rainstorm
Right.
and there are surface waters, and the surface waters come in and they go into my basement where I have all my records? Am I covered?
You're only covered if you were able to purchase flood insurance, which is a national program. Flood is not covered on your basic policies under water damage. So if you are in an office, which is on the first floor, and very often you have a step down, you have a real problem from water, and you really have to get flood coverage.
So that's another thing you have to ask your broker. Look at all the things you got to ask your broker.
You know, you're absolutely right.
Now, here in New York City, in any metropolitan area, forget about the surface waters, but we have an old infrastructure, and pipes are breaking consistently. Every year you hear about another major pipe breaking, and all the businesses on that avenue can be flooded out from this pipe.
You're
those be
talking
covered?
you're talking about a pipe in the street?
Yes, or in the roadway.
Only if you had flood coverage.
So you have to ask the broker for a special flood insurance program.
If he's susceptible to that, if he's on the first floor.
David, how many businesses in New York, stores or what have you, in Manhattan I'm talking about, ask for or get flood insurance? I mean, that's something that you would expect on the South Shore of Long Island or on the Jersey Shore, but how many people in New York City would even think,
Or any urban area.
or in an urban area where you don't have surface waters, rivers, et cetera, how many people get that?
Unfortunately, not enough.
Yeah.
And you'll find that you get these inquiries after these occurrences, but generally, most people just kind of skip that form of insurance.
Well, let's go back now. We're talking about property damage for a business person.
Right.
All right. Now, we mentioned fire. We mentioned water. What happens now? I've had a fire loss, and it takes me weeks, if not months, to get my business back together. Well, who's going to pay me for the 2 months that my business was closed down and I didn't have any revenue or anything?
All right. Your package policies today cover what we call business interruption insurance, which picks up your income loss and your expenses during this period, assuming that the loss is one that is covered under the policy contract. Then your business interruption applies.
In other words, if you didn't get the insurance for the flood and you don't have that coverage,
Exactly.
you're out of business with the business interruption loss, because you're not going to get coverage for your business interruption unless you have the basic coverage for the actual loss itself. Isn't that right, Dave?
That's exactly right.
David, it sounds like when I get my insurance policy, I should send it to my lawyer, because this is not a simple contract. This is a contract that really needs reading, as any contract, and perhaps consultation with somebody who really knows what they're doing.
Well, more than that, because the insured, all respects to David, but the insured is held to know what the contents of his policy is. He can't come back later and say, I thought that. He has to know what that policy is. He can't rely
'Cause it's written.
exclusively. He can't rely on his insurance. He can ask the insurance broker for something X, Y, and Z, and may get coverage somewhat different than he anticipated. But he has the responsibility of knowing what that policy says.
Ben, I have a question for you. If the insurance broker sells me
You know,
this fire, the policy we're just talking about for the small business person, the insurance broker sold it to me. Is the insurance broker working for me? Is he my agent, or is he working for the insurance company? Is he their agent?
well,
Who does he represent, Ben?
that's a very good question. He may represent both. You have a dual agency thing. That's always troubled me a little bit, because the so-called independent agent, as opposed to those agents that work exclusively for an insurance company, Allstate, Nationwide, are those companies that have agents that are really their employees.
But when I go to them, doesn't it say Allstate on top?
Absolutely.
Or Nationwide right on their office?
Absolutely. But when you have the so-called independent agent...
David, like David is.
David really serves two masters. He serves both the insurance company as a representative of the insurance company, in many cases as an agent, and the insured, who is his client. And sometimes it does create a problem.
I don't really think so. Even though we are agents of the company, all we do is represent the company as far as the product is concerned. We are essentially interested in supplying the proper policies to our policyholders. However, the courts today will come back and say, well, the policyholder is not intelligent enough to understand all the ramifications. Therefore, it's incumbent upon the broker to make sure that you ask the proper questions and give him the kind of insurance he needs. So it puts us in a difficult position.
It does put you in. That's exactly what I said.
Many
you are in a
times,
difficult
a
position.
businessman goes into business,
Right.
or anybody who gets a car insurance or something of that nature, calls the broker and says, I need this type of insurance. And I hear the words on the phone, you're bound. What does that mean,
You're
Ben?
covered.
What does that mean? I
Well-
didn't get a contract. I haven't even paid the bill.
You don't need a contract to have insurance. I think that there are binders that are issued, representations by the broker/agent, because if they're an agent of the insurance company, they can issue these binders, and it really is a representation that insurance has been affected for you. There may be a spread of time between the time that the words are uttered and the binder issued to the time that a policy is actually received. Sometimes there are issues that are created there as to what was said and whether or not insurance was actually affected. Have you ever had that problem, Dave?
I've never had the problem, but I can see where it can
Sure.
arise. You do bind people over the telephone. You may not have the application even signed at that point.
That's right.
However, since you represent the company, you do the underwriting in this case, and you know that this is a client that the company would accept, and therefore you, under the obligations that you have permission to do that.
David, people are sitting in their living rooms right now, and they're saying, all right, I just heard about if I had a small business. But here, I'm in my living room, I maybe in my co-op, I'm in my rental apartment, I'm in my condo. Here in metropolitan New York, you're usually in one of those three. Or I'm in my house.
Right.
Now, what kind of insurance do I need? You're an insurance broker. You're one of the best. Tell me now, what kind of insurance does a renter need, if any?
Okay. Basically, there are two principal forms. One is called renter's policy, which a renter uses. It covers his property, it covers his liability, essentially.
Liability, again, if someone falls down in the apartment.
And by property, you mean
Trip and
his
fall. By
contents,
property,
furniture,
his
stuff.
clothing, furniture, fixtures, bric-a-brac, all his possessions. A co-op or a condo owner gets a policy which is called either co-op or condo. It's the same thing. He has certain additions to that policy. He's responsible for all losses that occur to the inside of his premises. So he buys what we call dwelling coverage or additions and alterations. So if he has water damage, for example, or fire damage, he's responsible for all the repairs, all the repainting, replacement of floors. So that particular coverage is added to a condominium or co-op owner's policy.
So every co-op or condo, that's what you recommend. Even if they don't live in it?
It's
Let's
built
assume-
into the policy.
What if they don't live in it? They rent it out.
If they rent it out, they're not entitled to that policy. You must live in the premises to get that policy. If they rent it out, they have to obtain a dwelling fire policy.
Oh, wait a second, David.
Yes.
What happens if you have you have a fellow that's got a condo or a co-op, and he gets one of these policies, he lives there, and then he decides to go away for a year and sublets it. Doesn't tell you. Now he has a loss. What happens then?
We have a problem.
You have a problem.
Because he has the wrong form of insurance.
Uh-huh.
Because the policy specifies that you have to occupy the premises.
Do you mean to
be
say that the
entitled.
insurance company would not pay him for his loss if he left his furniture there, he walked away because he had to go somewhere for a year or so, he sublets it during that period of time, would he have a problem with his insurance company and getting covered for his...
He could very well have a problem. He's in violation of the contract. Now, some companies might pay him and other companies might balk, but it is a gray area. He is in violation of the contract. He's supposed to be living there.
When there's a loss, do you find that the insurance company reads their contract again to see whether or not the insured or the claimant has complied with each and every term?
Oh, no, but they don't read the policy. They know what the terms are. They're the ones that wrote the policy.
Right.
They're the ones
And
that
they make sure that...
You know, we talk about a contract, but this is a one-sided contract because the insurance company prepares it and they give it to you. And there's very little, if any, negotiation on the terms of the contract. So you have the responsibility as an insured, which is exactly this point, of knowing what you're covered for. And having a good broker like David who can inform you when you're covered, when you're not covered, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. They have to keep in touch with David on every step that they make. Am I right?
Well, sure. We advise them if they add to their furniture and fixtures, if they add fine arts, if they need more money
More jewelry.
coverage. Jewelry, certainly. We can't guess at what they have, but we do tell them if they're adding things to let us know.
Right. Incidentally, the issue that we have with the condominium and the
Renter?
and as a renter, that holds true for a house as well. If someone has a house, gets a homeowner's policy,
Exactly
it's
so.
called a homeowner's
Right.
policy. It's an all-risk policy, and he decides he's going to sublet even a part of that house without telling you, right? Now we have a loss. He's not a homeowner. He's a renter.
Well, what happens actually when you rent your premises,
Yeah.
your insurance no longer is what we call a personal form. It becomes commercial. You're in business. You're renting property.
Do they pay you for the loss if you have a homeowner's policy?
Well, you have a problem.
You have a problem.
You have a real problem.
David, let's go
That's
to the
where you
same
need a good
people.
lawyer.
And we have one right here. Let's go to the people again in their living rooms. Let's
Right.
assume that I am starting to do work right out of my living room, right out of my bedroom, right out of my garage. How many times have we heard about these startup companies that have become billion-dollar companies that start in their garage? Do I need any type of additional insurance to my apartment, homeowner's insurance, if I start a business right out of my home?
Well, there are some things you can do on your personal policy form. It does cover business property in a limited way.
We're going to finish that answer right after this break. You're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Stay with us.
Out! Out! There's no ways out! It's impossible!
Actually, Coach, it's not. See, Jimmy had to travel a distance of 90 feet. He reached an average speed of 15 miles per hour. The ball left 2 seconds later than Jimmy and had to go 1.5 times the distance.
If education is important to you, talk to your child's school about raising academic standards. Call 1-800-38-BE-SMART for a free booklet. And be a big league
Thus
parent.
enabling it to reach the destination at a much quicker rate.
Did you factor in the wind speed?
Your parents are always bugging you to get out of the house and get some exercise. But you've got your own way of doing things. You're your own person. You don't need to follow the crowd or the rules. And the last people you want to be like are your parents.
Johnny, tell them what they want.
While walking in a toy store the day before today, I overheard a crayon box with many things to say. Like red said yellow, and green said nor do I. And no one here likes orange, but no one knows just why. Well, I bought that box of crayons and took it home with me and drew with all the colors so the crayons could all see that each of us is special and everyone's unique. But it's when we get together that the picture is complete.
Hello, you're watching Lawline. Today we're talking about insurance, your business insurance, your home insurance. You should learn about it. With us is my partner, Ben Zalman. Also, we have one of the biggest brokers here in the metropolitan area, David Kane. Listen, you'll learn. David, right before the break, we were talking about if you're doing business out of your own home, your own apartment, your own condo, your own co-op, do you have to call your insurance broker and tell them?
You absolutely should, because there is an endorsement you can add to protect your liability for an incidental office, which means it's not the principal function of the premises you have. The premises are supposed to be for living purposes, but you can have an incidental office. For example, a dentist, a doctor, an accountant, a computer person. Very often they have a small office where they work at home. You can endorse the policy.
Startup internet company.
You can endorse the policy to cover the liability exposure, and you can also add property coverage.
Well, let's talk about it, David. What could possibly happen? I'm running a business. I'm running an internet business out of my home. I got my computers. I'm online. I'm selling. I'm buying. I'm trying to make a living. Why do I need insurance?
Well, you need insurance to protect your property, for one thing. You've got
Someone
computers.
steals my computers.
Okay, you have to get coverage for your computers
That I
and all your
understand.
electronic equipment. You may have a client come into the premises, and anytime you have public coming in, you have an exposure.
But wouldn't that be covered under my homeowners if somebody comes into my own home?
No, because it excludes business.
Really?
Yeah. Your personal properties are geared to your personal life.
So let me understand this. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you're right. In other words, if you have a small business that you're running out of your home, and you get a homeowner's policy,
Right.
and you don't tell the broker that you're running the small business, and the homeowner's policy provides for liability insurance in case someone trips and falls, and a business customer comes in, trips and falls, you mean to tell me the insurance company won't defend you in that case?
That's correct, because the coverage isn't there unless you've added the liability for an incidental office, or You can take out insurance specifically for your business, even though it's in your home, which many people
So
do.
the point of all of this is you always have to go back to your broker and tell him what you do.
When you're doing something out of the ordinary, that the average homeowner
Although a lot
does
of
not
people
do.
won't think that that's out of the ordinary.
Dave, let's go back to that computer. You know, computers are becoming, by the minute, by the day, by the week, more incorporated into our every lives. What happens if I'm running that business out of my house, and you know we hear about these viruses that come through email, don't open the email, and we open it, and all of a sudden I'm running this business, and I got this virus, and I can't get my product out. Can I get insurance against viruses that come over the internet?
Well, you would have to, yes, there are policies that cover viruses now, but you would have to have the particular insurance for your computers and your electronic equipment.
And the insurance company may tell you to give your computer 2 aspirins and send it home. I mean, what kind of coverage can you get for that?
Well, you do have a loss. If you're out of business, you have basically a business interruption
Okay,
loss.
so it's basically business interruption. It's not the property.
No, it's because your property is not destroyed. Your computer is still.
But the software may be.
You can be insured against software.
Okay, Ben, you handle claims. You represent insureds who make claims against the insurance company, and I know they only come to you
Reluctantly.
when they don't get paid
Yeah.
or they're not getting paid enough.
Okay.
They feel that the insurance company's offer, if any, is inadequate. And they come to you because I know you work on a contingency fee
Okay.
for the most part. You take a percentage of the monies that they get, so you don't get paid unless they get monies.
All right.
So what is it? What should they do to protect themselves? First, from a businessman's point of view and from a homeowner's point of view, if they're going to have a potential claim. And you never know if you're going to have a claim, but what should they do before the claim to protect themselves?
I'm going to say something that's going to make David very happy. The thing you should do is, number one, deal with a reputable broker. Because a reputable broker will get you to a reputable insurance company. My experience is that on claims that have been submitted, it's the insurance companies that are bought on the cheap that deal with the insureds on the cheap. The so-called good hands policies that are issued, the insureds don't get a fair break always.
You're not referring to any particular insurance
Not at all.
company now.
Not at all. I wouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying, David?
I know what you're saying.
You get to a decent insurance company, what they call a carriage-type insurance company, and they'll deal with you honestly and fairly.
Then when I'm-
You get to other types of companies, they may not do it.
Then
So
first-
you have to deal with a decent broker to get to that.
First, we're talking about under homeowners.
Yeah.
If I have a fire loss and I put a claim in for every item I have in my house, to be quite frank, Ben, I don't even know half the items I have in my house, no less all the items. I don't know half the items I have in my closet for the clothes. I don't even know what I paid for that TV set I purchased 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, very, very few people do, and it makes good sense to periodically do an inventory of the house. In fact, it's been recommended that you take a videotape cassette, go through the house with your video cassette so that you can actually see what you have there at a particular time. And to take that video cassette and don't keep it at home. Put it in a safe deposit box somewhere in the event that you do have a loss. You can update it periodically every couple of years in case there's any changes.
We generally suggest to our clients, number one, that they take pictures. And we'd be happy to keep it in their file in the office so it's at
Sure.
another location. For 2 reasons. 1, to show the adjuster if everything has been destroyed. 2, to remind yourself of what you have.
That's right.
Because no one can possibly remember all the items you have in your house, even in one room.
And Dave, what about the small business person? What should they do?
Well, I think it's a little bit easier in a business. You do have better records as a general rule. You usually keep all your bills. You have accountants on a regular basis, so you're usually up on your values. So I think a small business has less of a problem than the average homeowner who tends to let these things slide.
That may or may not be true, David, depending on how the small business owner keeps his books.
Well, assuming he's one that has a regular accountant that does his books on a quarterly or semi-annual, even annual basis, I think that's true. But there are people that run businesses, you know, off the back of their hand, and as a result, when they have a loss, they have a big problem.
They have a big problem.
Ben,
That's true. I've seen that.
A loss occurs. The insurance company makes me an offer. I'm not happy with the offer. Is there a time limit for me to first notify the insurance company? Second, to actually bring an action against the insurance company?
As I said before, the insurance policy is a contract, even though it's a contract that's been prepared exclusively by the insurance company. There are time limitations. You have to notify the insurance company as soon as practicable, in most policies in quotes. That means that there's no time limitation, but it's got to be fairly quick after you know of this loss. And as far as a lawsuit is concerned, the policy itself usually has a time limitation.
And normally it is?
Well, it depends from state to state. In New York State, it's generally a two-year time limitation. Goes back to reading the policy. Every policy will set forth what that time limitation is.
David, I often heard the term bad faith. The insurance company is dealing with bad faith, especially in states like California. I read decisions where they've held that the insurance company is responsible and they've dealt with their insured in bad faith and they get hit with millions of dollars of damages. When does that occur? When is an insurance company operating in bad faith?
Well, when they offer in, let's say you have a fire loss, and they know that it's going to take so much in the way of dollars to reconstruct, and they offer you half the amount.
And they know I'm desperate because I have nothing left. I have no place to live.
Right. They can squeeze
I'm in a
you like
hotel
that.
room with 3 children and a wife,
Right.
and I just need some money to get back into my home.
Yeah. And that's what some companies might do. That's what they would call bad faith. I don't think it occurs very often with most companies in New York State. I've never had the experience. The companies I've dealt with from 35 to 40 years now, the same companies, and we just don't have things like that occurring.
Now, Ben, if I get bad faith, do I get punitive damages?
Not in New York. Not in New York.
What about in other states? What is punitive damages, Ben?
Well, punitive damages are not your actual damages, but are intended to punish the party that's being sued, not necessarily insurance company, to punish them for what the court and the general public would picture a tort, an improper act. So it's really a punishment, and serves that purpose. You can't get that in New York State. There's been one case, but it was a kind of an aberration.
And you heard it here. Ben Zalman, thank you very much for appearing on Lawline. David Kane, thank you again for appearing on Lawline. And as always, this is Alan Schnorman, and thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111.